Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sam DeCoste, and let me tell you, the Champions League never disappoints, and this year is certainly no exception. We're going to dive right in today and talk about the Champions League. We're going to talk about all the Champions League quarterfinals, including Leipzig's and Lyon's upset victories over Atletico Madrid and Manchester City. We're also going to preview the upcoming semifinals in the Champions League coming up early this week. And stick around to the end of the show when we revisit the transfer mill and I'll tell you about the latest rumors, including Jadon Sancho, Thiago, and Cristiano Ronaldo to Barcelona. You'll definitely want to stick around for that. That's going to be a fun segment. But we're going to dive right in today. We're going to start with a breakdown of the first Champions League quarterfinal. And it has to start with Bayern versus Barcelona. By now, you all know the scoreline, which will live on in infamy in the history of Barcelona and in glory for Bayern Munich. The score ended 8-2 after one leg of Champions League knockout play. Now, we all knew that this game would be massively one-sided, and I even predicted in the last show that Bayern would win by 4 goals. It would be 4-0 for Bayern Munich. And so, personally, I'm not surprised that Barcelona were blown out of the water by Bayern because Bayern were always the much stronger team entering the game. Barcelona had so many weaknesses across the board. It just had blowout written all over it. But 8-2 is a different kind of blowout. It's in the territory of 7-1 between Germany and Brazil. Even when Bayern played Barcelona back in 2013 and that ended 7-0 over 2 legs in favor of Bayern, that fits in this category as well. But this game will live on in history. And the numbers 8-2 will forever live on as the day that Barcelona fell from a cliff. It was just so unbelievably surreal and a little bit sad seeing a European superpower at the level of Barcelona unravel before our eyes with the whole world watching. And most of these goals in the game were tap-ins. They were pretty easy goals, which were just byproducts of very basic errors and flaws in man marking, with Piqué and Lenglet failing to mark Lewandowski in the box, and Perisic, and covering runs from Thiago and Goretzka and Kimmich. From top to bottom, Barcelona failed in every single way, and it was in the most basic of errors. It was in the most basic techniques of defending by playing a high line, by giving into the pressure that Bayern were playing on the high press. It was getting caught in possession. It was turning the ball over. It was not being able to defend one-on-one. Basic traits of football that these players should know like the back of their hand, knowing that they play for Football Club Barcelona. These basic errors aren't acceptable for a club like Barcelona. Maybe it's okay for clubs like Borussia Mönchengladbach or Sevilla, but for Barcelona, that is not the standard. They develop players better than this. They bring in players who are the best of the best. And on the night, they were absolutely terrible. And there's no shortage of adjectives that you can use to describe just how humiliating this is. And that's one of the adjectives you can use. There's humiliating. Humbling is a good one. And just how merciless and ruthless of a display this was from Bayern Munich, who already scored 4 goals within half an hour, and really did not let up, because in the second half it was full throttle, it was full go, full send, and Barcelona had no answers to contain Bayern's prolific scoring. Bayern just kept going, and a club like Bayern and in a footballing nation like Germany, they don't hold back and they don't have mercy. And on Barcelona, they just kept rubbing salt into the wound that Barcelona has been awaiting for years. The loss was really summed well up by Gerard Piqué, who is really synonymous with Football Club Barcelona and Catalonia as a nation and a region. And Gerard Piqué talked about how humiliating and humbling this loss is, and how after this nobody is safe, including himself. And although he didn't include himself necessarily in his statement after the game, he knows, and we all know, that Gerard Piqué is part of the problem, and that Gerard Piqué will be included in that influx of players who will have to go when this is all said and done. But Piqué, what he said, which is really what resonates from this loss, is that Barcelona have hit rock bottom. Barcelona has never really been as low as this, or at least not in a very, very long time, and that would encompass a period of about 50 years that Barcelona have been this low. This is a different level of ineptitude and failure at the club European level for a club like Barcelona. This is the first time that Barcelona have conceded 8 goals in one game since 1946. That is how the times have changed, that Barcelona are making a 74-year record, but not the type of record that you want to be making. And one of the best ways to sum up this game in terms of how the game went and the state of these clubs is Philippe Coutinho, who, I remind you, is the most expensive player in Barcelona's transfer history, who was loaned to Bayern Munich and played against Barcelona, and he had a brace to finish this off at the end of this game. And while Coutinho didn't celebrate, it really marked how dysfunctional that this club was, that you would spend 120 million euros on this prolific player from Liverpool and then give up on him after a season and a half because he wasn't quite doing it for your club. Then you loan him out to Bayern Munich and he scores a brace in your biggest game of the season to add 2 more to what was already a 6-goal rout for Bayern Munich. And for Philippe Coutinho, if Bayern do go on to win the Champions League, which looks very likely, they are the favorites as it stands, Barcelona will have to owe Liverpool 5 million euros, because according to the transfer between Liverpool and Barcelona in the deal, that is, it was agreed that if Coutinho ever won the Champions League, Barcelona would pay Liverpool 5 million euros for that. Oddly enough, the contract did not state, and there was not a term that said that Coutinho had to win the Champions League with Barcelona for Barcelona to make that transaction. So as a result, if Bayern win the Champions League with Philippe Coutinho, Barcelona will owe 5 million euros to Liverpool, which is a pretty good way of summing up how just shambolic this whole thing is, and how shambolic of a state that this football club is in, and how the times have really changed and the tide has turned on the Catalan giants. And Coutinho is just one of the many failed transfers that Barcelona have made in just the past handful of seasons. Coutinho, the most expensive transfer in club history, loaned to Bayern and scores a brace against them in the biggest game of the season in an 8-2 victory. Ousmane Dembele, the second most expensive transfer in Barcelona history, wasn't fit enough to play in this game, hasn't been available in pretty much each of the 3 seasons that he's been in Catalonia, and even with him mildly fit with a chance to play in this game, he didn't even stand a chance to get into this game. And with Antoine Griezmann, who's the 3rd most expensive transfer in Barcelona history, 120 million euro transfer from Atletico Madrid last summer, even Antoine Griezmann, who has had defined strengths and has his own defined position with the French national team as a World Cup champion and the Golden Boot winner at Euro 2016, and a player who scored 30-plus goals a season in Atletico Madrid in La Liga for season after season, as a striker, as sort of a player complementing the top striker, the number 9, like how he played under Olivier Giroud with France. And then Barcelona asked Griezmann to play as a flat-out number 9, and when he wasn't playing number 9 for Luis Suarez, he was playing on the left as a winger. And neither of those are prototypes that Antoine Griezmann is suited to play. That is not his playing style, and it never will be his playing style ever again, not in this stage of his career. That's not how you purchase players. That's not an adequate transfer policy for a European superpower, which this club is just not anymore. Now let's talk about Quique Setién, who is the manager of Barcelona, or he was, not anymore. As you're listening to this podcast, Quique Setién is axed as manager. And it's surprising how long it took for Barcelona to actually make the decision to sack him. Quique Setién should have been sacked after the 5th goal. He should have been sacked after the 8th goal. He should have been sacked in the locker room. He should have just been abandoned in the stadium. He should have been sacked at the airport and let him pay for his own ticket to get back home. He should have been sacked when they got back home. And it took him until after lunchtime in Barcelona to actually fire Quique Setién. Quique Setién never belonged as manager of Barcelona. He's been a deer in headlights pretty much during his entire tenure at the helm of this club. He's gotten his tactics wrong, his player selection, and whenever you turn on Lionel Messi in the press and in the locker room, that's never going to galvanize the squad, that's never going to win over the best player on the planet, and it's only going to spiral for you and for the club. Quique Setién, this isn't Deportivo La Coruña. This is Bayern Munich, who you're playing, and you're the manager of Football Club Barcelona, one of the most glorified, most decorated clubs in the world that this world has ever seen. And he doesn't deserve to be in the spot. He never belonged in this spot. And that goes down to Quique Setién. That goes down to the board of Barcelona. That goes down to the president, Bartomeu. Blame is widespread, and it's deservedly widespread, because Quique Setién never belonged at this club, and it's because of the board's appointment of him and Quique Setién's tactiveness and his entire coaching philosophy that Barcelona have suffered one of the greatest losses in European football and world history that will be remembered forever in infamy. Also, what's Quique Setién changing his formation for? Barcelona plays a 4-3-3, and they've played a 4-3-3 all season, but for this game, Setién adjusted the formation to be a 4-4-2 and have Suarez and Messi play up front and have a midfield loaded and bring back Busquets, Vidal, Rakitic, and Roberto. And if it's a tactical strategy and it's what you feel like your best 11 is, then that's one thing. But Barcelona and Setién made this adjustment to adjust to the opponent. It's Barcelona adapting to their opposition. Since when has that been done? Barcelona do not adapt their game plan to anybody. They're Football Club Barcelona. They do what they want, and they take the game to you, and you have to adjust to them. And that in itself shows how the times have changed for this club and how they have to adapt to other teams when they really didn't have to. Sure, Bayern were the much stronger team, but when Barcelona are at their best, they are a great team, and so you need to roll out your best team, your best starting 11, use your best strategy that's won you so many games, that got you second place in La Liga, that's taken you as far as it has, and it's taken you to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Use what got you there. Don't use something that you don't know, because when you play not to lose, you can get absolutely humiliated, and that happened to Barcelona last week. Another stat which defines this humiliating loss for Barcelona: Bayern scored 8 goals. Barcelona had just 7 shots the whole game. That shows just how lopsided this match was. This match cannot be underestimated as an unequivocally devastating and defining loss in club history. And it will humble Barcelona, hopefully for them in the right direction, for them to right the ship for this club. Their weaknesses have been hyper-magnified. They've been there all season. They've been there for the past few seasons. But now the gap between them and the top European titans has never been wider. Barcelona are no longer the biggest club in the world. Arturo Vidal said that Barcelona are the number 1 club in the world in the build-up to this match, which obviously is a quote that has not aged very well at all. But this club is far from restoring their place as the top club in the world. They've survived the season without being horribly exploited yet, but they've been getting away with a lot of poor play against bottom-tier opponents. But leave it to Bayern Munich to exploit their weaknesses and show the massive gap in quality, class, tactics, and prestige. And this has been a long time coming. The knockout punch has really been getting winded up for years now. Going back to 2016, Remember when Barcelona lost the first leg in Paris in the round of 16 to PSG? They came back only to lose 3-0 in Turin to Juventus again, and then the next year they lose to Roma after having a 3-goal lead. Last year they lose to Liverpool after having a 3-goal lead. This was the knockout punch. The losses to PSG, Juve, Roma, and Liverpool were all humiliating, and they were all emotionally heartbreaking in their own right. But at least in all of those games, they had a shot. They had a reasonable and feasible chance of advancing, and in some cases, it was prevailing over a terrible first leg performance. In other cases, the most recent cases, it was a matter of slipping with your hand at the wheel when you were in firm control of the game. But this one trumps all of those losses in the past, because while Bayern may not necessarily be the best team of all those teams, although they're certainly up there in the teams that Barca have been knocked out by in the past few years, but losing by 6 goals is not in this club's DNA, and it shouldn't be. This is just purely unacceptable. Those losses were embarrassing to Roma and Liverpool, but Bayern Munich's 8-2 whopping of Barcelona trumps each of the past 3 years of humiliation combined. It may easily be the end of an era for this club, or close to one. The lore and the appeal of Barcelona has been tainted. It's not gone forever, because this is a club with glory and history, with the best players on the planet to play for them in its history, including just now with Messi, Suarez, Piqué playing for them, and the days of MSN, the days of Thierry Henry and Zlatan, and Ronaldinho, and Johan Cruyff. This club is truly one of the greats, and they have set the standard for world football. It's going back pretty much to the start of the century. It has been Barcelona, and they have been the standard for world football. But not anymore. Those days are over, and those days ended a long time ago. We just didn't know it very well, because Barcelona have really been getting away with it for a long time now. And nobody knows it better than Lionel Messi right now. Messi is reportedly set to let his contract expire with Barcelona, which goes until the end of the 2020-21 season, which is next year. And so essentially Messi is saying that he will not return to Barcelona after next season unless there are wholesale changes and massive overhaul at this club to change the direction of the club, to right the ship, to make this 8-2 a day of the past and a memory to forget. And let's be honest here. Messi departing Barcelona is impossible to imagine, because him and Barcelona are synonymous. When you think of one, you think of the other. Barcelona are the club that took Messi in when he was living in Rosario, who was the flashy young kid who looked like he could be the next big thing. And then Barcelona paid for his treatment to help with his human growth hormone. The club that saved him, the club that gave him a home, and that gave him a home for the past 30 years or so. It's impossible to imagine Messi leaving, but honestly, objectively, my opinion, he should leave. He needs to go. He's seen the writing on the wall. He's seen the disaster that's been unfolding at this club. He knows that this club needs a massive overhaul and restructure. He's watched his boyhood club waste the final years of his career as a footballer with horrific transfers, faltered ownership, and terrible, heartbreaking results in the most prestigious competition of world football, in the UEFA Champions League. This isn't the 2015 Barca, which, by the way, was the last time that this team won the Champions League, and it's a travesty in itself that it's been 5 full years since Barcelona has lifted the Champions League trophy. They should have won it last year because they had a 3-goal lead over Liverpool until they completely faltered in Anfield and just succumbed to Liverpool's momentum. This isn't the team in 2011 or 2009 that won the treble, or even the team in 2006 that won their second Champions League. This isn't the club that was managed by Johan Cruyff, which won their first Champions League and started ascending and establishing themselves as a prominent European superpower. This is not Barcelona. This is not Barcelona, and it has not looked like Barcelona in a long time. Messi has been forced to carry Barca on his back for the past 2 years, and it's gotten worse and worse by the year. 2014 really was the starting point for this collapse of the club. When we saw Carlos Puyol depart the club, they haven't been able to replace him. Xavi's left the club in 2015. They haven't replaced him. Dani Alves the next season. Neymar, Iniesta. all of these players, some of the best players ever in world football, and certainly icons of Barcelona, have all left, and it's been Messi carrying the load ever since. And Messi, he's done that for Argentina, and Argentina has been rightfully criticized for how Messi has been forced to carry the load for his national team for a long time, and it's really been Messi or nothing when it comes to winning international competitions. Barcelona have turned into Argentina, but maybe even worse, you could say, because at least Barcelona can choose who plays for them, and they can go out and get any player in the world that they want, because they are Barcelona. They can get whoever they want. But Messi's been carrying the load by himself, and he knows it's time to hit the reset button. This is forever going to remain a permanent stain on Barcelona's decorated history. The 8-2 will never go away. And it's time for wholesale changes. It's time for some big names to go, including Gerard Piqué, Sergio Busquets, Ivan Rakitic, Luis Suarez, even Arturo Vidal and Ousmane Dembele. Players who have been a part of every bit of success that this club has seen over the past decade plus, even just the past 5 years. It's time for them all to go. No matter how great they were at their peak, no matter how great their name value is, no matter how great they were, and no matter how loyal the club is to them, it's time to rip the Band-Aid off once and for all. Piqué, Busquets, Rakitic, and crew, it's time to go. It's time for this club to sell and clean house completely. The more that you long and just remain in nostalgia of the days when Barcelona were at their peak, the worst it's going to be in the post-Messi era. Because if you think Barcelona are bad for not replacing Xavi and Puyol and Dani Alves, wait until Messi is gone. Because Barcelona without Messi are a mid-table side at best. Barcelona without Lionel Messi are at best a mid-table side. And they need to reinvent themselves if they're able to survive in the post-Messi era. Unless they want to become an AC Milan or a Manchester United. A club with all the money in the world, a club with all the European glory that you could want, but a club with its best days behind it once and for all. If Barca don't act fast, 8-2 will be remembered as the night that Barcelona Football Club were put to rest once and for all. The situation is salvageable, but they have to act quickly. Otherwise, like I said, this club will be an AC Milan-esque shambles. Now, enough about Barcelona. We know how woeful they were. Let's briefly talk about Bayern, because there was a team that scored 8 goals in this game that deserved credit. They sent a huge statement to the rest of the world. Presumably it would have been Manchester City that they were sending a statement to, but obviously not, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Bayern Munich will be flying high on confidence and momentum going into the semifinals and to the final. Thomas Muller himself, he's seen a career resurgence with the assists and the goal scoring. It was Thomas Muller who opened the scoring within 5 minutes. It was also Thomas Muller, interestingly enough, who opened the scoring in the 7-1 game against Brazil when he won the World Cup with Germany. Also, Goretzka and Thiago playing phenomenal in the midfield, orchestrating everything. Alphonso Davies and Kimmich creating havoc on the wings and just creating so many goal-scoring opportunities. Terrific movement on and off the ball for Bayern. Now, as great as they were far from perfect in this game. Bayern played a very aggressive high line, which was caught quite often in this game. And although Barcelona were wiped out in this game, they did have a lot of spells where Barcelona's high line nearly made them pay, where Bayern were playing very high and aggressive, but there was plenty of space out there on the counterattack. And if not for some poor crossing and tame finishing, there could have been more goals in it for Barcelona. But who knows who will have a field day with that, because with the field in this competition remaining, Lyon, Leipzig, and PSG, I'm not sure if any of those teams have the talent or the tactics to really capitalize on that. So I think Bayern have really seen the worst in terms of who they're going to face in this competition to win it. But there's no reason to doubt Bayern's ability to win the Champions League. And it is difficult to judge them based on Barcelona's extreme weaknesses, because Bayern did have weaknesses that were clearly demonstrated in this game. But in the end, Bayern's strengths, their attack, was remarkably too overwhelming to handle. And there's no reason to doubt Bayern are the undisputed favorites to lift the Champions League once again. This team has been undefeated since December 7th. And that seems like a long time ago, and the world has changed a lot since then. but Bayern Munich are 2 games away from the treble, and it's hard to see anybody standing in their way. That is the end of our segment wrapping up Barcelona and Bayern Munich. The battle of the SCVs in 2020 will certainly live on as one of the most memorable Champions League knockout games that we have ever seen. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the other 2 Champions League quarterfinals in which we saw 2 other European giants crash out to some massive underdogs. Don't go anywhere.
Are you looking to get your college football fixed? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the show. We've delved long enough into the battle of the FCBs, but there were 2 other quarterfinals that were played since the last show, so let's talk about those. Let's talk about the other 2 semifinalists who booked their ticket this weekend, and there are really 2 shock surprises, as well as Bayern's 8-2 win over Barcelona. We saw 2 underdogs take over some European giants this weekend. And we're going to start with the earlier of the games, Atletico Madrid versus RB Leipzig. The game ended 2-1 for RB Leipzig. The goals coming from Dani Olmo and Tyler Adams. Tyler Adams, the first American in Champions League history to score a goal in the quarterfinals. And Adams' goal came in the 88th minute of the quarterfinal to knock Atletico Madrid out and send RB Leipzig through to the next round. It was, in a weekend of shocking results, this one does certainly stand the test of time, and it will be remembered as one of the all-time great upsets in the tournament's history. Let's start with Atletico Madrid briefly, because this show is full of a lot of criticism for some European heavyweights. We just talked about Barcelona for 20 minutes and how they've really fallen apart, and the gap in quality between them and the European heavyweights has really widened in the past few years, and it's been exploited this year more than ever. Atletico Madrid may have gotten their knockout punch once and for all. This team really is the shadow of the team that we saw even just 5 months ago. We forget it because of how COVID-19 has really changed our timeline and our calendar. But Atletico Madrid were the team that knocked out Liverpool. The holders are out because of Atletico Madrid. Liverpool were up in extra time at Anfield, and Atletico just took it on. Marcos Llorente had 2 goals to really cement Atletico's spot in the next round and knock out Liverpool decisively so, and very shockingly. In that game, specifically the second leg we're going to talk about, they were defensively superb. They were able to cope with Liverpool's pressure, and they were able to get the upset miraculously so. But in this game against Leipzig, defensively they were solid. We knew that the game was going to be, honestly, a little unwatchable because we know Atletico and Leipzig, their styles of play, mostly Atletico, they were really good at going to park the bus. They were going to put 10 numbers behind the ball, and they were going to try and get Leipzig on the counter. And they really looked too comfortable throughout the whole game in terms of they were too comfortable to go to extra time. They were too comfortable to go to penalties. And that's not going to do it in this type of competition. You can't play not to lose, because more often than not, when you play like that, when you play conservatively, you end up coming out the loser. And that's how it came up in this game, because Atletico Madrid showed no will to exhibit any offensive flair in this game. And they have the quality on their side to do it. They spent 120 million euros for João Felix, who's a top 10 transfer of all time in terms of transfer money allocated, he's only scored 3 goals in the Champions League this season, including the penalty that he scored to equalize in this game against Leipzig, only for that to be undone by Tyler Adams' last-minute winner. João Felix, in terms of technical ability, is the greatest goal source on this team. He is the most talented. And with Diego Costa and Morata not really doing the job and getting up there in age, João Felix was supposed to be the guy and really lead Madrid from the front for Atletico and really be the source of most of their goals. And you can attribute his really slow start to his career in Spain to him, or you could do it to Diego Simeone. It's a combination of both, but Felix is super talented, and Atletico Madrid don't use him. It was honestly a mistake for him to go to Atletico Madrid, considering for a player like him to really take the next step as one of the world's greatest footballers, going to Atletico Madrid, a team that just does not have any will or desire to really have a possession-based footballing style. Their football is based on defending and putting numbers behind the ball, and as good as it is for Felix to be two-dimensional and be able to defend very well, that's not where his strength is. But it's more than João Felix, because he wasn't the person who lost the game for Atletico Madrid. Although Simeone taking him off after 58 minutes is certainly questionable in itself. Why would you take off your most talented player after an hour is played in your biggest game of the year? I'm telling you, in all these games, there are some really questionable decisions being made by the managers, and we'll get into that a little more with the next segment. But also, in terms of this game on paper, I know all of you out there, including myself, rightfully so, wrote off Leipzig because we knew that Leipzig, they beat Spurs in the last round, but that was when Harry Kane and Heung-min Son were injured and they were not available, so it really wasn't that difficult for Leipzig to get past them. But for this game, Atletico Madrid drawing RB Leipzig for the quarterfinals, you could say there were other games like Atalanta or Lyon who were a better draw. But for Atletico Madrid, considering their side of the bracket and how things unfolded, this was the dream draw for them. Atletico Madrid, on paper, are the more talented team, the better team, but they seemed perfectly content sitting back the whole game, putting numbers behind the ball, and letting the game go to extra time and beyond. That seemed to be their intention and their game plan right from kickoff. Just when you think Atletico Madrid have taken a step in the right direction, they take 2 steps backwards. Because, like I said earlier, where's the team that knocked out Liverpool? This team destroyed Liverpool in extra time in the second leg. This team knocked out Liverpool, the high-pressing Liverpool with the attack of Salah, Mane, and Firmino. They destroyed the Reds in Anfield. Now, you could talk about if they would win this game in 2 legs, because the one-legged affairs really make this... They really shift the approaches for this game for the coaches. It creates a whole different atmosphere of the likes that the Champions League has never seen and will probably never see again. But still, Atletico Madrid on the same bracket, the same side of the bracket as PSG, Atalanta, and Leipzig, you would fancy Atletico Madrid to at least get to the semifinals, maybe even get to the final, and they could even win it if they were at the top of their game. There's no doubt that Atletico Madrid could have won this competition, but maybe they peaked a long time ago. Atletico Madrid under Diego Simeone, who's been there for a very long time now, going back to 2013, Atletico Madrid have peaked. They will never reach the heights that they did back in 2014 or even 2016, because this team has won La Liga, but that was 6 years ago. They've made it to 2 Champions League finals, but that was back in 2016 and before. This team is not built to get back to the Champions League final. You could say they were this year, and certainly the way the bracket lined up for them, it really would have been shocking not for them to get to the semifinals at the least. But that's exactly what happened. They didn't even make the semifinals. They lose in the quarters to Leipzig. But it's the first ever semifinal for RB Leipzig, which is remarkably impressive. And we are going to give some respect to Leipzig because on this show we do want to give credit where credit is due. And it's time to put some respect on the name of Julian Nagelsmann, who is the manager of RB Leipzig. And the way he approached the game and the way the game played out, it's not often you say that Diego Simeone is outcoached, but that happened in this game. Julian Nagelsmann really outcoached Simeone on Thursday night. And don't forget, Timo Werner, who is the RB Leipzig talisman, or was the talisman for this team, is gone. He's in London now. He's being acquainted with London and playing with Chelsea next season. So he's not even a part of the equation in this, which makes this win even more impressive that RB Leipzig are able to go to play Atletico Madrid without their number one striker for the past 3-4 seasons and win with goals from Danny Olmo and Tyler Adams. That's just unbelievable. That is just an unbelievable result for a club that's only 11 years old, mind you. And Atletico Madrid, a European superpower in their own right, trying to get to the final for the first time in 2016 and really make a deep run, which they were built to do, and the draw had them lined up to do. But on the night, they couldn't get the job done. And maybe we underestimated RB Leipzig. Maybe we overestimated Atletico Madrid. But in any sense, the Champions League continues to shock us. And just when you think you have everything figured out, you really don't. And that's a perfect segue to talk about the last semifinal of the Champions League, Manchester City versus Lyon. Now, we're pivoting over to the other side of the bracket, and that was the side of the bracket which had Manchester City, Bayern Munich, Barcelona. So we anticipated having a collision course between Manchester City and Bayern Munich, essentially. And that was what it was supposed to be. But then Lyon goes off script completely by knocking out Manchester City, one of the favorites, if not the second or favorite to win this competition. Manchester City, this was their year to go all the way. And this goes for Atletico Madrid as well. This is a season, obviously the pandemic has changed so much, but nonetheless, that doesn't change the fact that Liverpool, Juventus, Barcelona, and Real Madrid were all knocked out before Manchester City were. Manchester City would have had only Bayern Munich really stand in the way between them and their first ever Champions League title, the trophy that has eluded them for so long that they've really been going for the past decade. This was the year. If there was a year for Manchester City to do it, this was it. If you only had to beat Bayern in a semifinal and maybe PSG in a final, that was feasible for Manchester City, because at their best, Manchester City may be the best team in the world. I'm not sure anybody can beat them when they're at their best. You could debate that with them in Bayern Munich, but certainly after their performance against Lyon, you can't say that anymore. If City couldn't get it done this year, then they never will. This was the time. The window of opportunity was wide open for Manchester City, and every year it just closes a little bit more. And this club is one of the shining examples in world football of how money just can't buy you the Champions League. Teams win. Coaches win. It's about tactics. It's about strategy. It's about team spirit. It's not about the money. And that's cheesy to say. It's not money. Money doesn't buy you anything. Money doesn't buy you happiness. It's easy to say cliches like that. But the numbers are shambolic for this club. Manchester City have spent $943 million since the 2016-17 season, which was Pep Guardiola's first in Manchester. And ever since, they have never advanced past the quarterfinals in the Champions League. They went to the semifinals in the year before Pep took over under Manuel Pellegrini, and they lost to Real Madrid, who won the competition. But the past 4 years, you look at Pep's tenure in Manchester City, just look by the years. 2017, they get knocked out in the round of 16 by Monaco. Now, that Monaco team was prolific. They had Kylian Mbappe, who really came onto the scene as the next great world footballer. They had Bernardo Silva, Fabinho. They had an array of world-class talent on that team. And so they got knocked out by Monaco that year. 2018, you lose to Liverpool. Liverpool beat you 3-0 in the first leg, and you just can't come back from that. Liverpool really shell-shocked Man City in how they approached the game, because that was a Liverpool pre-Alisson as well. And that was when Liverpool lost Philippe Coutinho as well when he went to Barcelona. 2019, Manchester City get eliminated by Spurs. And you could talk about VAR, because VAR really did come to be Manchester City's downfall. You can argue if the offside was correct. You can argue about that all day long. But Manchester City lose to Spurs in a miraculous two-legged affair, especially the second one in the Etihad. But they go out to Spurs based on the away goals rule. Then this year, Lyon. With all due respects to Lyon, when you put up all of those teams, because Manchester City have lost to some very great teams over the years. Monaco, Liverpool, Lyon, and Spurs, of all of these teams, of all of these defeats, of all of the heartbreak that Manchester City has suffered over the years, this one trumps all of them. You can't get any worse. You can't get any lower than Manchester City got tonight. No way. Not to mention, that was the last we'll ever see David Silva in a Manchester City jersey. David Silva's had one of the most decorated careers for a midfielder in this generation, and his career is over now. 90 minutes in a game against Lyon where Manchester City were massive favorites. David Silva goes out this way instead of maybe even going to the semifinals or a final where he could have hoisted the Champions League trophy for his team, for the team that he's been with for so many years now. It's a tragic way for David Silva's career to end, and that's just one of the many compelling storylines that you could talk about from this game. Now let's talk about Pep Guardiola, because of everybody that was a part of this defeat tonight. Pep Guardiola really gets most of the blame, because it's not often, like I said about Diego Simeone, it's not often that you could say that this coach is outcoached by another team's coach. But for Manchester City, Pep Guardiola was outcoached by Rudy Garcia, because Lyon got their tactics spot on. Lyon pushed up the field in the first half. They pressured Manchester City into a mistake. One long ball over the top was enough to catch City out in the back, and then made them play from behind all night long. It's a very simple tactic on paper, and there's not much to it, and there's not a lot of extravagance or complexity to this, but it was very effective, because one long ball was enough to catch Manchester City out and force them to play from a deficit all night. But then Rudy Garcia transitioned them from a high-pressing team to pressing the back line of Manchester City, so putting the pressure on the back, with the back seven of Lyon dropping back and defending to contain City's relentless attacking movements, because when City trail, they put everybody to go forward. They really throw the kitchen sink at you when they go forward, when they're losing, at least. But Garcia was adaptable. He morphed his game plan mid-game. After Lyon took the lead, he knew that they couldn't keep doing what they were doing, because if Lyon used the same game plan that they did in the first 20 minutes of the game, which got them the first goal, if they used that over the 90 minutes, they would have lost this game most likely, because it's not in Lyon's setup. They're not built to do that over a full game. And that's why Garcia was adaptable. And that's a tactic that even Pep Guardiola, one of the most decorated managers in the world, has yet to accomplish in the past 10 years. And that would be adjusting your game plan on the fly. When something isn't working, when your plan A isn't working, trying something new. That is something that Pep Guardiola in the past 10 years has still yet to figure out. In previous years, Pep plays his style, his tiki-taka, his way of playing football. That's how he plays always. But 2 years ago, he was caught out by Liverpool. Last year, he was caught out by Spurs. And this year, he was a little over-tinkering. He tinkered too much. He played not to lose, and his conservatism really proved costly because, they're out of the competition already. It was quite a defensive setup against a remarkably inferior opponent, because Lyon have some talented players, but against Manchester City, it's not a comparison. It's night and day. Manchester City have one of the most talented squads in the world, because money can't buy you titles, but it can buy talent, and Manchester City have that in abundance. Nonetheless, they were still caught on the break, and they were caught in possession way too many times, even though they had a very conservative defensive setup. And honestly, 3 straight quarterfinal exits for Manchester City, each more heartbreaking than the last. But this one trumps them all. Lyon's not even going to be the Champions League next year. This team finished 7th in France. This team finished 7th in Ligue 1, who many criticize as one of the weakest leagues in Europe, at least the weakest top division in terms of the top flights in Western Europe. Now let's talk about Raheem Sterling very briefly, because if you watch this game, or if you saw the highlights, you know that Raheem Sterling had an absolute sitter that would have equalized this game in the last 15 minutes, but Raheem Sterling scoffed his lines, and he made a terrible error with a great cross coming in from the right. All he has to do is tap the ball, and it's his goal, and it's 2-2, and maybe Manchester City go on to spur on a victory, but Sterling skies it into the stands, not even close to hitting the target. This miss will define Raheem Sterling's career. No question. And it's really shameful to say, because Raheem Sterling is such a gifted footballer. He's so technically gifted, he's talented, and Pep Guardiola has really made him into a special player. You could say a top 20 player on the planet right now. Excellent player, but no matter what he does the rest of his career, let's say he even wins a Champions League in his career, if he wins the World Cup with England, no matter what he does, no matter how many goals he scores, his career highlight will be that. It will be him skying a sitter against Lyon in the Champions League quarterfinals. It's a Higuain-esque moment, you could say, because Higuain is a prolific striker in his own right, and he had a glorious career with Napoli, with Juventus, with Real Madrid, and Argentina. But a couple of key misses in the biggest games of his life will define his career, and they will follow him until the day he dies. And that's unfortunate for Raheem Sterling. You hope that he can bounce back from this, because it is truly a tragic highlight of that game, which Raheem Sterling skied the penalty, when he skied the sitter, excuse me. But Lyon, once again, we want to give them credit. Nothing spectacular about this game plan that was executed by Lyon or Rudy Garcia. It was basic in nature and on paper, but they played the ball in behind Manchester City's back four, playing through balls and catching City out of possession, including Manchester City's goalkeeper Ederson out of his goal line in the first goal. Lyon did everything they had to. The game plan worked perfectly. It worked to a T. And now Lyon are back in the semifinals of the Champions League for the first time in 10 years. And who would have thought? So that's a wrap on this segment with all of the Champions League quarterfinals in the books. And it is truly a quarterfinals for the ages. I don't think any of us anticipated we'd be seeing this many giants go out this early. The drama, the comebacks, the heartbreak suffered, and the underdog stories prevailing. So, to sum up, your Champions League semifinalists are Lyon, RB Leipzig, Bayern Munich, and PSG. We could expect PSG and Bayern maybe, but Lyon and Leipzig, oh my. Lyon and Leipzig are one game away from the Champions League final. And in the year 2020, we live in a world where Lyon and Leipzig could play for the Champions League trophy in just a week, which would be absolutely insane, but it could happen. So that is all for that segment. Coming up after the break, we're going to preview the upcoming Champions League semifinals. We're going to tell you who's going to win between Lyon and Bayern, Leipzig and PSG. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back from our commercial break. We just finished our recap of the Champions League quarterfinals, which did not disappoint, and it hardly ever does, but this year of all years with the one-legged affairs has produced some absolute magic. And in terms of the numbers, there are some pretty astonishing stats to describe the field of teams that are left in this competition. So once again, it's Bayern Munich, RB Leipzig, Paris Saint-Germain, and Lyon. Two teams we could have expected, Bayern and PSG, but Lyon and Leipzig are two epic underdogs for the ages that nobody foresaw would be at this stage of the Champions League. Two German teams and two French teams. You never really see a balance of teams like that. You usually see PSG push forward, maybe to the quarters or maybe to the semis. For Germany, Bayern usually pushes as well. Dortmund usually crash out earlier. So there's never really a balance of teams. And Bundesliga and Liga are really two of the most criticized and scrutinized leagues for how their field of play and competition really doesn't match up with the likes of Spain or England or Italy. But interestingly enough, this is the first time in 29 years that there are no Spanish, English, or Italian teams in the Final Four. It has not happened in 29 years in Champions League history. And even more interesting is the absence of Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, two of the undisputed best players of the past 10 years in world football. Neither of them are in the Final Four. Ronaldo was eliminated in the round of 16 by Lyon. Messi was shellacked along with all of Barcelona by Bayern Munich in the quarters. So no Messi, no Ronaldo for the first time ever in the span of their careers have they not appeared in the semifinals of the Champions League. But this year is one unlike any other, and so Messi and Ronaldo are both going to watch the semifinals from their couch for the first time in their combined historic decorated careers. Now, let's preview the two semifinals because there are two tickets to be booked for the Champions League final, which is coming up next Sunday. And while the games may not be what we expected, and they may not have the talent or the expectations or the anticipation as a game of this magnitude usually would, they still deserve our respect for one of the great games of the European football calendar. So we will do a deep preview of both of the last two games. So let's start with Lyon versus Bayern Munich. Now let's talk about Bayern, who really are the undisputed favorites to win this competition, right above PSG. Bayern are the most experienced team left, and they are the most stacked from top to bottom. They are, from top to bottom, the most talented and experienced team. And they have every reason to believe that they're going to cream this French team and they're going to comfortably sail to the final. And let's talk about just the last game when they beat Barca by 8-2. We have Lewandowski bagging in the goals. We have Goretzka and Thiago, who played fantastic against the Catalans, holding down the midfield. You have Alphonso Davies and Joshua Kimmich holding down the fort as the fullbacks and creating chances down the flanks. And you have playmaking substitutes and impact players like Perisic and Coutinho making impact plays. And Muller orchestrating the offense and seeing a career resurgence with the game of his assists and even his goal scoring is back. Bayern have rediscovered their mojo, and they haven't had this kind of mojo in a very, very long time. Bayern are such a well-oiled machine at this point. It's going to take some stopping to knock them out, and it'll take a complete performance from Lyon to really make Bayern, to really put Bayern in the same line as Manchester City on a plane back home. But there are some weaknesses to Bayern's game which were exploited in the game if you looked carefully. Specifically, the most glaring weakness that we spotted in the quarterfinal against Barcelona was the high line. Because Bayern Munich, in terms of the quarterfinals, Bayern play the highest line in the world. At least they did in the Champions League. They played a very high line against Barcelona. Now, part of that might be Barcelona's 4-4-2 formation, and they felt comfortable leaving Messi and Suarez as the lone two forwards up front in a very high line. And it did work out for them because the high line really wasn't threatened to a degree in this game. Now, there were instances in this game where Barca were pushing forward, and there was plenty of space down the left and right flanks, especially the right flank. But Barcelona really didn't capitalize on that. There was poor crossing throughout, and there was tame finishing. So Manuel Neuer's net wasn't really truly tested apart from the own goal from Jerome Boateng or from the one goal from Luis Suarez. For the most part, Barcelona did not threaten Bayern's high line, although they did go forward a few times. And it could be slightly concerning for Bayern Munich, the way they played against Barcelona. Now, maybe they'll adjust their formation against Lyon, but maybe not, because Bayern will underestimate Lyon in the sense that they are the 7th place team in France. They are not the quality of Manchester City, because let's be honest, Bayern Munich were really expecting Manchester City on this side of the bracket. So seeing Lyon in the semifinals has got to be very interesting for Bayern Munich, and they are going to underestimate them a little bit. But coming off the emotional high and the momentum they're reeling off from that 8-2 win over Barcelona and sending Barcelona into one of their darkest days in their history, Bayern have a lot of reason to feel confident in this game. And they have a lot of reason to believe that their high line is going to work again, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And while it's not necessarily perfect, it worked. Their game plan worked against Barcelona, and so they're going to keep doing what got them this far. And that is what you would expect. You want to make sure when you're making a deep run in any international tournament, you want to keep what you have, and you want to just be consistent with your strategy. You don't want to make any wholesale changes, like Man City and Barcelona both made tactical changes to their lineups, which really played into the hands of their opponents, and ultimately ended with their own downfall and with them getting knocked out much earlier than they would have anticipated, and getting decisively knocked out, surprisingly, from what they were expecting. But Lyon could test this Bayern high line if they really go for it. And Rudy Garcia will make sure that Lyon is ready. But Lyon will be able to test their back line. They can catch Bayern out of possession. They can catch them playing out of the back, because those are weaknesses of this Bayern Munich team that were not properly exploited by Barcelona or Chelsea for that matter. But Lyon can push Bayern's complacency. They did against Manchester City. All it took was one through ball, and that was the opening goal for Lyon, and that changed the whole spectrum of the Champions League knockout stage. And Lyon have a very quick attack. They have players like Memphis Depay. They have Toko Ekambi playing out wide, and they're natural strikers even though they play out wide. So it's going to be very challenging for Bayern Munich to cope with the pace and the technical ability and the finishing ability that they have out wide for Lyon. A single ball over the top was enough against Manchester City. It could be enough for Lyon against Bayern Munich as well. Who knows? But Lyon will have a game plan set in place with Rudy Garcia. Garcia is one of the most underrated managers in the world, but what he has done with Lyon in the Champions League, you could talk about his Ligue 1 failures this year, and that's understandable, but in the Champions League, you have to credit him for defeating Manchester City. That is a feat that you can't take away from him. Or his knockout of Juventus as well. Lyon knocked out Juventus as well just before the Manchester City affair. So Lyon are a team that is not to be underestimated, because the two of the best teams in the world already have, and they're already home. They're not going to be playing any more Champions League football this season at the hands of Rudy Garcia's squad. But an early goal for Lyon against Bayern will make this very interesting, because as it did against Manchester City, it's going to force Bayern slightly out of their game plan. It's going to play right into the hands of Rudy Garcia, whose tactical masterclass is the reason that they're advanced this far in the competition. And any time that a coach outmasters Pep Guardiola, that gives a massive advantage to Lyon, because Rudy Garcia, while Hansi Flick has done a great job with Bayern in the few games that he's been in the Champions League, Rudy Garcia is the better manager of the two in this game. So it's going to be very interesting to watch how Rudy Garcia copes with Bayern and how his strategy will play into their hands, if they're going to replicate the same strategy that they used against Manchester City, where they try to go aggressive and press forward, press the back line of Manchester City, try to get an early goal, and then park the bus and play a much more conservative defensive style to keep everything in front of them. We'll have to see. But Lyon, like I said, they're not to be underestimated, as Man City did to them. But Bayern will be happy to play Lyon at this stage of the competition, whereas City was lined up with the bracket, and we were expecting Man City to play Bayern at this stage of the competition. But Lyon, like I said, they did finish 7th in Ligue 1. They will not be seen as a massive threat by Bayern, and fairly so. They really shouldn't be viewed as a massive threat, but you still have to consider the fact that they did give Juventus and Man City their ticket back home. But that underdog mentality of Lyon is going to be a huge weapon for them. Being able to play with no pressure on you can push Lyon as far as they please, because the feeling of not having any pressure is such a gratifying, liberating feeling that really could spur on Lyon. Bayern Munich have all the pressure. All the pressure in this tournament is on Bayern and PSG. Anything that Lyon does from here is just a bonus. Lyon have done what they needed to do. Lyon have surpassed all expectations by making it this far, and they could get defeated 5-0. They could lose 8-2 to Bayern for all anyone cares, but this will live on as one of the great seasons for this club's history, and they will be remembered for this miracle run where they knocked out the Italian and English champions from last year and the year before. But all the pressure's on Bayern. A semifinal defeat to Lyon, as great as Lyon have been, would send Bayern into a total downward spiral. And while an 8-2 would not be in the making for Lyon would not win 8-2 in this game. But if Lyon did pull off the miraculous underdog victory, that might give a Bayern-esque atmosphere to this club. Bayern may have to make wholesale changes. They might be calling for a massive overhaul of this club, because this team does have plenty of old players, and while some of them have seen career resurgence, and while Lewandowski has been bagging in the goals all year, maybe Bayern will face similar criticism and speculation as Barcelona is right now, because it's only been 48 hours since Barcelona have been eliminated, but there's already been wholesale changes, including a possible Messi departure this summer as well. But it shows that anything can happen in one leg of Champions League football, and Bayern will feel very confident, and they should. Lyon can't be underestimated, but for everything that we've seen, there's no reason to believe that the Bavarians will not comfortably advance to the final of the Champions League. Only 2 wins away from the treble, and you have to have a feeling that Bayern are set up to do just that. Now let's go to the second semifinal, which is coming up next week as well. It's PSG versus Leipzig. PSG coming off a comeback victory over Atalanta, in which it looked like they were doomed for yet another heartbreaking loss. The same old story for the Parisians, but then 2 late goals in stoppage time for PSG. The late show, you could say, pushed them into the semifinals for the first time in 25 years. Meanwhile, for Leipzig, this is the farthest they've ever made in European football in just their 11th season as a real club, starting from Germany's 5th division to 1 game away from the Champions League final. Just an amazing feat that really does not get enough credit even now after their win over Atletico Madrid. That is a remarkable achievement for one of the lower, smaller, younger clubs on the planet to make it this far. And like I said with Lyon, anything Leipzig do from here is just a bonus to what they have done this year. But PSG are the undisputed favorites to advance, and it would be a disaster if they didn't. And PSG will not sit back like Atletico Madrid did against Leipzig. PSG will attack, and like they did in the second half against Atalanta when they needed a goal, when they needed to get back in the game, PSG will go after it all night long. And Leipzig, while they had a prolific defensive performance against Atletico, only giving up a penalty the whole match, this will be PSG's opportunity to really count the goals up, because Leipzig's defense is going to be coping not with João Felix or Diego Costa or Alvaro Morata. This is Neymar. This is Mbappe. This is Di Maria, who's back from suspension, and Mbappe, who's had rest and recovery time after he looked pretty great as a substitute against Atalanta. Now, Mbappe could be on the bench again in this game. We're not sure of that yet, but considering how great Mbappe looked, he looked very healthy against Atalanta in the second half. But additionally, if you want to bring in Mbappe as a sub in the second half, that could play into PSG's hands very well again, to bring that next element of dynamism and explosiveness to the offense that the first half didn't have. Even though PSG really did create a lot of chances in that first half, but they were all defined by Neymar misses. Now, that won't happen again. Neymar will have his shooting boots back for this game, and Mbappe will as well. After a few days of more rest, he will be recovered, and Di Maria returning. The only problem with PSG is that there will be one player who will not be available who was in the last game, and that's Keylor Navas. PSG's star goalkeeper and the 3-time Champions League winner left with an injury in the quarterfinal with about 10 minutes left. So Navas left that game early, and he has already been ruled out for this game. So the task will fall to Sergio Rico, who is a very serviceable goalkeeper, has tons of starting experience with Sevilla in Spain, and he is you could say he is a great backup to have for PSG. So no Navas, but you have Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria will return. PSG should feel very strongly that they can go on and make the final comfortably against Leipzig. But briefly pivot over back to Leipzig, because they do have some talent in this team, and Julian Nagelsmann will have his team coached up and ready to go for PSG. They'll have Yusuf Poulsen and Patrick Schick to be counted on to deliver in the attack. They have Dayot Upamecano, who was brilliant in the back and neutralized Atletico's attack single-handedly, not allowing anything in his defense. Although it's going to be difficult, like we talked about. Leipzig have a defense that was strong enough to stifle Atletico Madrid, but when you put Atletico's starting 11 in terms of at least their front three, and you stack them up with PSG's front three, it's not even a comparison. It's a night and day type of comparison. PSG have way too much talent to overwhelm Leipzig, and you have to imagine that PSG will comfortably sail to the Champions League final, the first in their history. Whoever advances out of this game will make their first ever appearance in the Champions League final. For PSG, even though it is a first and it would be a monumental feat for this club, even that would be an amazing achievement for PSG, making it to their first Champions League final and maybe winning it if they have the strength to go on and do that. But for Leipzig, making it this far is an epic fairy tale that will live on forever and could go on. Who knows? The story is not over. There could be another twist to the tale, because if there's anything that we've learned about this year's Champions League, literally anything is possible. And it's cliche, it's cheesy, I know, excuse my cliche, but Leipzig have nothing to lose at this point. Anything out of here from here on out is a bonus, and Leipzig will have the motivation, they will have the strength, and they have the tactics, they have the manager to go and do it. Because one last comparison, a head-to-head comparison for this matchup. When you compare Julian Nagelsmann from the manager of Leipzig, and you compare him to PSG's manager, Thomas Tuchel, you have to say there is a strong advantage in the hands of the Germans. Nagelsmann is by far the superior tactician in this matchup, and the things that he has up his sleeve will certainly outsmart Thomas Tuchel. But what makes this game so lopsided for PSG's favor is that they do have the more talented side. They have Mbappe and Neymar and Di Maria, and they also have a very talented midfield, very talented back line, and Verratti will be back soon as well. PSG should advance. It should be Bayern PSG when it's all said and done. Leipzig have no right beating PSG, but they didn't have any right beating Atletico Madrid. Lyon had no right beating Manchester City. But with Julian Nagelsmann, they have everything in front of them, and they can go as far as they want. And Leipzig will make it close, but PSG will pull through in the end. That is the Champions League semifinals preview. I cannot wait to watch these games, even though they aren't the stars that we're used to. No Messi, no Ronaldo. We have Lyon and Leipzig. Very unfamiliar faces for this stage of the competition if you're a neutral fan or if you follow the game very sporadically. But this has been one of the most entertaining Champions Leagues that we have ever seen. At least it's the most entertaining that I have ever seen. It's been just unbelievable seeing all these underdog stories, seeing new names take on the big clubs and knock them out, and seeing how clubs like Juventus, Manchester City, Atletico Madrid, and Barcelona now have to cope with the future, which could be a dark one for some clubs, some darker than others, including Barcelona. Now that is it for our recap of the semifinals. Coming up after the break, it's about the latest transfer rumors. You don't want to miss this.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back from our final commercial break. We've just finished talking about the Champions League. This has been a very Champions League heavy show, and rightfully so. Very entertaining quarterfinals that we had to talk about. We had to preview the semifinals because by the time you listen to this, the semifinals may have already been played, and I want to make sure that you have the analysis and the preview that you need going into these semifinals. But now that the football is behind, let's talk about transfers because, like I said, it's the middle of August. It's transfer season, and there are plenty of deals that are in the making that will be finalized very soon, and there are deals that could be blockbuster that we need to discuss and talk about the latest transfer sagas going on in world football. We're going to start with a long shot. Now, you've probably seen this in the news, and it is more of a headline than a story, but nonetheless, it has that grasp on us that we really should discuss, at least for briefly. We need to talk about Cristiano Ronaldo, because Juventus have been offering him to pretty much everybody, as it seems. Now, whether Juventus will keep him or not, that's something to be determined, although Andrea Pirlo's appointment should be enough to keep him in terms of keeping a manager, a glorified former player brought in to really galvanize this Juventus team and bring in a new era of Juventus football. But nonetheless, Juventus have offered Ronaldo's services to a number of clubs across Europe, whether it's for Juventus to gather up wages back from Ronaldo's just absolutely insane wages annually, whether it's to get back some transfer money that they've spent over the years. But Ronaldo has been offered to Barcelona, which is really just a headline of fantasy football come to life. That's something that you would do in FIFA. You would try to get Messi and Ronaldo to play on the same team just to have fun and just to see what that would be like. And let me just state for you now that this is nothing to see. Ronaldo will never go to Barcelona, and there are a number of reasons for that. For example, the history of Madrid and Barcelona. Now, football fans know that the Clásico and Madrid versus Barcelona is the number one rivalry in the world in terms of football, and it's always must-watch television. But the rivalry is bigger than just the two best teams in Spain. It's about a history of political turbulence in terms of civil war and oppression. And so it's beyond the football, but Ronaldo playing for Madrid for 10 years and going to Barcelona would be impossible. There's no way this would happen. There have been players in the past who played for both teams, Barcelona and Real Madrid, but Ronaldo will not be one of those few players, and it will never happen, especially with the history that Barca fans have with Ronaldo. Although it is fun to play with our imagination and think about how Ronaldo in Barcelona would be an epic story. It would be the first double-headed GOAT in the world. And that would be because these are two of the greatest players ever. And seeing them on the same team outside of FIFA, I think we'd all love to see that. But that would never happen. That would be a mere pipe dream and the longest shot that you could ever imagine. And Ronaldo was offered to PSG earlier in the summer. And Ronaldo reportedly wants out of Turin. He wants just life out of Turin, not out of Juventus, but he wants to live in a different city which has a different vibrancy than Turin, because according to Ronaldo, living in Turin is like living behind the mountains. So he would love to get out of Turin and live in a different city. And with the PSG offer, you can imagine the footballing aspect of it, playing with Neymar and Mbappe, but also the aspect of living in Paris and trading Turin for a life in Paris. I think we would all make that trade. I know I would. And Ronaldo certainly wanted to make that trade. But Ronaldo is likely to stay at Juventus, barring a miraculous offer from one of the top clubs in the world. PSG would be one of them. Barcelona maybe, but there are not a lot of clubs that can afford Ronaldo's wages or give Juventus the transfer fee that will make them feel comfortable enough to let him go before Ronaldo's contract expires, because Juventus, after all, did bring him in to get them to the Champions League, and he still hasn't done that yet. Not to fault Ronaldo, because Juventus have really failed him more so than Ronaldo's failed Juventus, but Ronaldo knows he has work to do at Turin as well. Now let's focus on Barcelona, because in the fallout of this 8-2 loss, there are a lot of heads that are going to be rolling after this game, and nobody is safe. There is a list that has been released to the press of just a handful of senior players on Barcelona that are deemed unsellable, that are indispensable, that Barcelona do insist on keeping for the future. Some of them are very obvious, some of them you can guess at the top of your head, but the list is Lionel Messi, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, Frankie de Jong, Ansu Fati, and Ricky Puig. They are 5 players, you can count them on one hand, and they are the only 5 players that Barcelona are absolutely committed to keeping this summer. They are not open to selling any of these players, no matter how much Messi says he wants to leave potentially. But the others, they want to keep. Ter Stegen's been a great goalkeeper. He's done nothing wrong to make Barcelona want to move on from him. De Jong is still young, and he's still considered a very important part of Barcelona's project for the future. Ansu Fati and Ricky Puig are 2 very young stars coming out of La Masia, and they really saw some important minutes in La Liga this season and in the Champions League, and Barcelona feel that their trajectory is very promising and that they don't want to let them go as well. But apart from Messi, Ter Stegen, De Jong, Fati, and Puig, everybody else is open for sale. That includes Luis Suarez, Ivan Rakitic, Samuel Umtiti, Ousmane Dembele, and Jordi Alba. All of those players who have been really players that have defined this generation of Football Club Barcelona, they are all on the transfer market, and Barcelona would be happy to sell any of them. And it's hard to refute that because these are players that are, let's talk about Suarez and Rakitic. They are on the wrong side of 30. They have regressed. They are still good players. Suarez is better than Rakitic is at this point, but they don't really belong at Barcelona anymore, and they do need some upgrades at that position. Not to mention they both had their problems with injuries in the past few seasons, especially with Suarez. Suarez has had some injuries over the past few years, and this season has been very injury-ravaged for him as well. And Jordi Alba, who has been their prolific left-back for the whole decade, his defensiveness and his defensive struggles have really made him expendable to the eyes of the Barcelona board. So pretty much except for those 5 players that I named, nobody is safe, and anybody could be sold. We could be seeing Piqué sold, Suarez, Rakitic. We could be looking at a very different Barcelona next year, so it is certainly the end of an era in Catalonia. Moving away from Barcelona very briefly, let's talk about Manchester United and Juventus. There has been a swirling transfer rumor that's been really developing for the past few months and is really starting to take center stage in the transfer market. That would be a swap deal for Paulo Dybala to go to Manchester United and for Paul Pogba to return to Juventus. Andrea Pirlo, as manager of Juventus, is looking to strengthen the midfield, which is the weak point of this Juventus team. And Andrea Pirlo, in his playing career, when he was at Juventus, played with a very young Paul Pogba. And Andrea Pirlo is a big fan of his game. He loved him as a teammate. Andrea Pirlo is reportedly very keen on having him as one of his own pupils. And Pogba would certainly, on the face of it, love to be a pupil and be coached by Andrea Pirlo, who's one of the great midfielders ever. And in the past few years, Juventus pretty much have been keen to sell Dybala out of the club every season he's been there. Every summer there's been rumors about Paulo Dybala leaving the club. He was linked to Spurs a few years ago. He was linked with Man United plenty of times in the past few summers. But it seems that Dybala is more likely to leave Juventus than ever. That being, even though Dybala has been a prolific player and he's very young, very promising, and he won the MVP award in Serie A this year, Dybala is not safe under new management. Who knows what Andrea Pirlo thinks of him, for example? Who knows what Andrea Pirlo thinks his fit could be at this team if Andrea Pirlo sees a fit for Paulo Dybala? But this is the summer that he is most likely to leave than ever. And Pogba and Dybala are both very similarly valued, and this would be a straight swap deal without any cash being exchanged, because with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a higher frequency and abundance of swap deals, and that would be straight swap deals, to cope with the financial ramifications of the pandemic, meaning that if players and clubs could agree to this, so if Man U and Juventus agree that they would want to swap Paulo Dybala for Paul Pogba, and they believe this to be an even trade-off, and that they view this as a win-win, this move is very feasible, and it could easily go through. It would be one of the headlines of the summer, with seeing Paulo Dybala join Marcus Rashford, Anthony Martial, and Mason Greenwood, even Bruno Fernandes, and Pogba returning to Juventus and trying to revitalize that midfield under Andrea Pirlo. This would be a fantastic story to follow, and it certainly could happen in the coming weeks, and I promise you we will definitely cover the latest on this swap deal as it develops as the summer goes on. Moving right along, let's talk about Thiago Alcantara, because Thiago all summer has been linked to Liverpool. It is the worst kept secret in world football that Liverpool want Thiago and Thiago wants Liverpool. Talks have been ongoing for weeks between Klopp and Thiago, and reportedly terms have been agreed between Liverpool and Thiago to a 4-year contract for the 29-year-old Spaniard who currently plays for Bayern Munich. Although talks will resume between the clubs as soon as the Champions League is over for Bayern Munich, whether that's at the hands of Lyon in the semifinals or whether it's after a treble win in a Champions League final. But Bayern want no less than 30 million euros for Thiago. And Liverpool are not necessarily keen on paying that full fee because Thiago's poor injury record is keeping Klopp from pulling the trigger right now. So this one could develop a little more slowly than the other deals because although the move is very mutually appreciated, the club and player want each other, and even Bayern Munich, the parent club of Thiago, have openly given the green light to Thiago to leave. This could be much slower in terms of how negotiations transpire once Bayern's Champions League campaign is over, and how Liverpool handle this, because they will have to offload some players before they have the money to go and get Thiago. Because right now, Liverpool are very heavy loaded with big stars, including Salah, Alisson, Van Dijk, and Mane, who are making a lot of money. And although Thiago would be a huge upgrade, Liverpool are going to have some work to do and some players to be sold in order to make this move happen, to make the room for it. But Thiago, this move, I can't emphasize this enough in every show. Thiago is better than every player in Liverpool's midfield, and he would be a huge upgrade in what they have already, and he would make Liverpool even better than they already are, and they already are the best team in England, as the Premier League showed us. Because Thiago's strengths is he's a conductor. He'll control the tempo of the game from the midfield and give the team a new dimension that they haven't had since the departure of Steven Gerrard. That is an element that Liverpool are really lacking, and that would make them very, very interesting to watch because everything else is there. The goalkeeper, the back four, the front three, and the midfield is very strong with Fabinho holding on the fort, and you also have James Milner, Jordan Henderson, Wijnaldum, and Keita. But Thiago is better than every midfielder in that team, apart from Fabinho, because they have very different roles. But Thiago would elevate the play of this team, make them score even more goals, which is a very scary thought if you're not a Liverpool fan. But this deal should happen. It's the worst kept secret in the world that Thiago wants Liverpool, and Liverpool wants Thiago. Moving on, let's talk about Ben Chilwell, the 23-year-old left-back English international at Leicester City, who had a great season with Leicester, getting in the top 5 this year. Although Chelsea have been after him all summer, and talks really hit the rocks a few weeks ago, but now Chelsea seem to have made a breakthrough in securing Chilwell's services. Leicester valued him at $80 million consistently throughout the summer, and Leicester don't want to offload him unless they get that full $80 million fee. But it seems that Leicester are being a little more compromising in terms of the transfer fee, and that Chelsea will have the funds to make this transfer happen. And Leicester are also keen on getting rid of his wages because he makes up to 65,000 euros per week, and Chelsea would be happy to take on that financial burden, and that would give Leicester a little more financial flexibility as they go into a Europa League campaign next season. Moving on, Declan Rice, the 21-year-old midfielder from West Ham, who had a great season with West Ham individually. West Ham were looking to sell him, if they want to sell him, for 80 million euros. And like the last player, Ben Chilwell, Chelsea are the favorites to sign Declan Rice, and they have been pursuing him all summer. Interestingly enough, we talk about how much Chelsea have players who they really gave up on very early in their careers and have now blossomed into some of the world's best players. To name a few, Romelu Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, the list goes on. But Declan Rice is one of those players that Chelsea abandoned. He was released by Chelsea at age 14, but now, as the decorated and very talented player at 21 years old, Chelsea want him back, and they want to pair him with Kai Havertz, who is inevitably going to sign at Stamford Bridge as well. Now, West Ham have already rejected a proposed swap for Declan Rice that would have included Ross Barkley and Batshuayi at Chelsea. So they've rejected that swap, although the trade-off with Batshuayi and Barkley truly isn't at the level of a Declan Rice, especially for a 21-year-old midfielder who has high potential. But Chelsea do seem very keen on Rice, although with all the money they're spending this summer, assuming they just signed Ben Chilwell and Kai Havertz, that's about 160 plus million euros that they would be spending on just 2 players. So the idea that they would have 80 million more in the budget to spend on Declan Rice is very questionable, and you wonder if they really have the room for that. But they're going to try as hard as they can to do that. But you probably have to imagine of Havertz, Rice, and Chilwell, Chelsea will get at most 2 of them. And Havertz is definitely going to be one of them. So it's between Rice and Chilwell, whatever they view as a more pressing need. But Declan Rice is very promising as a young midfielder. He's a young midfielder and he's very versatile. He can play CDM, be a very good central defensive midfielder. He can also play center back, which makes him very versatile and very useful indeed, especially for Chelsea, who have center back as one of their most glaring weaknesses. Next, Philippe Coutinho. We've talked about in the last few shows about Coutinho's potential future at Arsenal, as Barcelona are looking to loan him out again after his tenure at Bayern Munich expires. They want to send him out to Arsenal. Although this deal with Arsenal is in jeopardy before it even really began, or before the wheels really even got in motion with this one. Because the director of football for Arsenal, Raúl Sanllehi, or at least the former director of football at Arsenal Football Club, is out the door. He has departed the club, and he was the orchestrator of this deal for Coutinho to come to Arsenal. So Coutinho may no longer be a part of interest to the new directors. Coutinho wants Arsenal. He's wanted a Premier League return pretty much ever since he left Liverpool. Obviously, Coutinho prefers a Liverpool return, but Jurgen Klopp would also be welcome to that. But considering the way Coutinho left the squad right before they really started taking on England and the Champions League, and considering that Liverpool have wages being paid across the board that they might not have the room for, especially if they go for Thiago, his current teammate at Bayern, Coutinho, really his only option would be to go loan anywhere else except for Liverpool, and Arsenal seemed like the most likely destination, but that could all change with the departure of the sporting director, because he was the driving force behind the transfer talks. And not many people know this, but Raúl Sanllehi, the director, was linked with Barcelona. When Coutinho transferred from Liverpool to Barcelona, he was a member of Football Club Barcelona, and he was really driving Coutinho's move to Barcelona. And so, for Coutinho to escape the Camp Nou and get his move to the Emirates, it's going to be a little more difficult, and you have to wonder if this deal has really hit the rocks before it's really even begun. Although Coutinho does want Arsenal, and it seems that Arsenal may not want Coutinho anymore. Final transfer we're going to talk about, Dean Henderson. The 23-year-old goalkeeper, property of Manchester United, is attracting interest from clubs around the world, mainly in the Premier League. He's been spending the past 2 seasons on loan at Sheffield United. And if you know anything about Sheffield United, you know they've had a very great season for themselves. Last season, Dean Henderson was with them to elevate them into from the Championship to the Premier League. And in the top flight, he had a phenomenal season with Sheffield and securing a top 9 finish and being one of the most formidable goalkeepers in a very promising and very strong back line in the Premier League this season. And you have to be honest, with David De Gea regressing every single game now, and Henderson coming off a fabulous 2-season spell at Sheffield United, you have to wonder if there's a future for Dean Henderson at Old Trafford. And certainly right now, Manchester United are looking to sign a long-term deal and secure him at the club for years to come. And maybe Dean Henderson next season could actually play for Manchester United and play Champions League football, maybe even some cup games. And maybe if they balance the playing time between De Gea and Henderson, perhaps you could see Dean Henderson supersede David De Gea as the Man United's number 1 when it's all said and done. Because David De Gea has not done a lot to make his case as of late, while Dean Henderson is young and he's talented and he's been very productive as a goalkeeper. Now that is all of the transfer rumors that we have to talk about today. There are certainly a lot more developing rumors, spicy rumors, transfer sagas that are developing, that will be in the works, and signings will be made. As soon as we get back to you for the next show, we will certainly talk to you through the new deals that have gone through and the latest transfer rumors. But that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you once again for listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you, before you sign off, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review for us wherever you listen to your podcast, because that really helps us and our spread as a very popular soccer podcast. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for your support once again. I'm your host, Sam DeCoste. Until Thursday, I bid you adieu.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.